very quiet, so I'm going to turn that up. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm going to assume if you don't put anything in the chat that you can hear me. All right, perfect. All right, I know a lot of people come in late, usually fills up pretty quickly after because people are getting things done in their classes often until 4 o'clock. So anyways, this is Indigenous Holistic Practices Part 1 for sharing circles. I did a general presentation. Well, it was in the last 2 weeks. I can't remember exactly. I've done so many in September, but it was an overview of 5 different areas, and I'm going to explain that too a little bit as well, that I think teachers can use in themselves in their classrooms without necessarily needing an elder or knowledge keeper or something to that effect, because there's lots of information out there to be able to help you, particularly online. I did talk about sharing circles, and I'm going to go into greater depth within this session and open up some of those things and talk in more detail about them. Just so everybody knows, this is brought to you by the ARPDC, which is the Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia. I am through Edmonton Regional Learning Consortium in Edmonton, even though I live in Calgary, as their First Nations Métis Inuit lead person in presenting. And we're also funded through Learn Alberta. It's important for you guys to know that. I'm going to do land acknowledgement before we get going. So Tense, I live on Treaty 7 land, like I said, in Calgary, the ancestral home of the Blackfoot people. There are also Dene and Métis Nation number 3, which I belong to. And everybody's contributed to the shaping of Alberta and Canada. And if you would like, you can put in the chat which treaty land you're on or settlement that you're close to. I know there's 3 school divisions in Alberta that are not. So if you're not, it's always a good idea to find out whose land you're living on, the people that were displaced from that area. So who am I? If you have not attended any of my sessions before, and if you have, bear with me as I go through and explain. I did recognize, I see Melanie's on here. I used to teach with you. Hi, Melanie. So, and I do have some people that come regularly to my sessions, so there may be a few of you here. So just bear with me as I go through this again. So I am Tammy Johnson, and through ARPDC, now we're referred to as Designer of Professional Learning, which is a really good all-encompassing term, because yes, we do presentations for sure online and in person, but we also work on different projects and curriculum and things like that, and some just some lesson plans and things like that. And I'm going to show you some of that through the ARPD website as well for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit areas, so that you can access that, because there's lots of stuff that's already done by Alberta teachers. So there's really good resources there. I am Red River Métis from what is historically known as the Red River Settlement in Manitoba. My family's from north of Winnipeg and Selkirk, Manitoba, but I went to school in Winnipeg. My family's surnames are Mowat, McDonald, Mackay, and Beaudry. My mom is a Mowat. Mackays and Beaudrys are all across Alberta as well. The Beaudry family is actually a French voyageur Métis family from northern Alberta. If you look at the top of the page, there's a picture there of my great grandpa. Oh, nice. Thanks, Melanie. Treaty 7 in Canmore. Yeah. That's my great grandpa James Mowat sitting on the bench there. And then those are his 4 surviving children. My grandpa's the middle boy there, Rosser. I think that picture of the kids is around 1916, as far as I can tell. My grandpa looks like he's probably about 6 years old there. And his 2 brothers, Oliver and Stanley, and my great aunt Tassie. And if you live anywhere or if you've been to Fort Saskatchewan or worked there, you may know that there's a school called James Mowat Elementary, named after my great grandpa, and Mowat Park. And then in Edmonton, there's a street, James Mowat Trail. It's spelled with 2 T's, but it doesn't really matter, because the name was actually spelled M-O-A-D when they came to Canada, with a Scottish accent. A D is pronounced as a T. So it's all good. Anyways, yeah, I've just to kind of give you a little bit of my background is I started working on a project a couple of years ago with Kataskanal Tribal Council and Ignite e-learning to take their outreach program from grade 7 to 9, and I decolonized it, indigenized it for their particular cultures. I added land-based learning as well as Cree language, which I'm learning myself now. I'm actually in my 3rd session of Cree language at Misconwell here in Calgary. And I worked with their specialists, and then the elders took that information and they were really very happy with it. And so I was just encouraged to help other teachers doing this. And I know it can be particularly daunting and scary task for non-Indigenous teachers to do some of this work, particularly around the ideas of, making sure that you're showing respect for the cultures and, not appropriating and things like that. So I understand that. So that's why I do this work, is hopefully to help other teachers. I have been told that in one session that I talk too fast, and I know that can happen. I am Manitoba Métis, and if you've not heard of us all talking together, we all talk really fast, and I slow down my speech. But if at any time, please just put in the chat if I get too rambling too much. I do want to point out, like I said, the ARPDC resources for you, so you can see what's already been done. There's a lot of them, a lot of really great resources too, and different ways to find them. So this is the developmental resources area, and if you look, you can search by focus or your TQS. I did a session on the TQS and using FNMI resources. There's En Français, and then you can go by featured websites. Empowering the Spirit is on here, and this is actually used across the province. Even I've seen it noted on all of the university websites for education programs. So that's important to know. So you can look at it as, it's divided into foundational knowledges, leading learning, classroom supports, and then they've got lots of stuff in here for Orange Shirt Day and beyond. So lots of things like that. And then there's also, again, the Français one. And I know the people that are working on the French language are really working hard to get a lot of that done, so that everything that's up is also available in French. So yeah, there's lots on here, as you can see. So I'm not going to go through all that stuff because you can do that on your own. But I did want to show you as well, when you go to find resources by focus. So if you click on here, there we go. So focus, I'm going to just go to the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and it's going to come up with all these great resources, as you can see. So there's lots of stuff here already. So if you're looking for something, I suggest take a peek at that first. And then the other thing you can do is go by audience, and then you can go by level or type as well. So there you go. Yeah, so that just letting you know that those are there. So if you're looking for some resources and you're not sure exactly where you should be looking, they're all right there. Okay, so I'm going to get right down to business because I always have lots of resources to show you guys, and I want to make sure I have time to get through them. So I have identified, and this is even through talking to people in my community, and trust me, I have been challenged by people, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, I've been challenged by those in my community that are knowledge keepers and who have come up against, misinformation and that being shared. And so I've passed this by them, and they've agreed with me that these are areas that I can work in as long as I'm doing them appropriately. So I look at the sharing circle, I look at the medicine wheel, I look at the 7 grandfather teachings, and that's Anishinaabe. So there's also Cree teachings and Blackfoot teachings that are similar and that sort of thing. You can talk about that. Land-based learning, which we're moving to culturally based learning. I'm not going to get into that in great detail now, but and then storytelling. So those are areas really that I focus on when I'm talking to teachers in any regard to including things into the curriculum, because these are pretty all encompassing in terms of cultures across Turtle Island that are things that are used, and areas that you can, if done properly, can do on your own. So today we're focusing on that sharing circle first. And so I've done this before in other presentations, but I changed it up a little bit, but in case you didn't see that, the overview. So talking about the circle. So a circle is an Indigenous symbol across the world. So it's not just unique to Turtle Island. It's not unique to any particular group here. A circle is very much an Indigenous issue, like a symbol across the world, right? So this is just my take on it. So thinking about the Lion King theme song, right? It's one of my favorite Broadway shows. It's about the circle of life, right? So it's a physical manifestation of life's journey. All of creation is in that constant cycle of birth and rebirth. So if I think about a forest and a tree falls and it begins to decay, in its lifespan, it sent out seed for reproduction. Its roots found moisture and changed the terrain. It communicated with other trees. And no, I'm not crazy. There's scientific evidence for this. It provided a home, food, and shelter for various life, and so much more. And in its death, it helps to renew the forest with its nutrients for life. So it never really dies. I mean, if you think about it, it's never actually dead. It's provided more life and gone on in that circle, right? And so we all have that. Um, and so the circle is a sacred symbol of interdependence of all forms of life. So when we talk about anything about spirituality, family structure, gatherings of people, meetings, songs, and dances, everything we do is in a circle, right? Because we're all equal, right? No one's above each other. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Just kind of give you a little bit of the history behind this. There was not really a term for this, right? Nobody said, oh, we're having a talking circle or a sharing circle. Nobody said that, as far as I know. It was just we meet in a circle, right? This is what we do because it was, it's, again, it's a spiritual thing, right? When we meet together. Originally, though, when groups came together, and like if you think of something like a powwow when people came together, or if you think of on the West Coast, like potlatch, or any of those kinds of celebrations when people came from all over and had different cultures and different leaders together. Their leaders would meet together with the tribal council often at different times, and particularly important to be meeting in that circle because everyone had their turn in the circle. And it doesn't mean that there weren't any disagreements, because we're all human beings, and of course there were always things that people didn't always like, but there was always that element where you had to be respectful, and there are obviously consequences for not doing that and treating people with respect. But at any time, different objects would be passed around the circle, usually an eagle feather in the case of particularly when it was the men that were meeting. And I don't use the word chief because that's an English word. That's a colonized word, right? There were not really the word chief available in any of the languages. Yeah, it's a whole other discussion. But in the East, they use a wampum belt sometimes to do that, a peace pipe, or a sacred share, whatever that might be. Like I was at a sweat on Sunday, we sit in a circle in the sweat. The sweat is built in a circle, right? The sweat lodge itself. And, we pass it around a certain way. And if once you start passing the pipe around anything, or the food later, if you're sharing in the third round, you always pass it the same way, so everybody is treated equally. So it's a very important thing to do, to always follow those protocols. There's a reason for those protocols being there, and it's about respect and honoring each other. So I want to I'm going to show you this video in just a second. It's talking about why use sharing or talking circles, and this is a group that's led by an Indigenous teacher. And it's just a kid's reflection, and it is an upper elementary class, but and I do a different session on restorative justice. So we talk about all kids of all ages, but particularly the older ones, and using it for that purpose. So when I do this, I think this is applicable to any grade level when we talk about that. So I'll let you guys watch this, and then we'll talk about it.
The circle is probably the best way that I have found to bring student voice forward.
I love the talking circle, and I feel so happy doing it because everyone is open to share whatever they want. We get in a circle and you pass a feather around, and we always start with what we're thankful for. So we're all quiet, and the person who has the feather gets to talk, and everybody else is silent so we can hear them and hear what they have to say.
I think what's really, really important is to be very clear as to the level of respect that is required in a circle, in a talking circle.
And like in the morning, I feel confused, and then when I get into community circle, it's happy. I'm happy because it's like peaceful and it's not like screaming and loud.
It's about equality. There is no hierarchy. we're trying to, I hope, break down some hierarchy in the system and have more of a level of equality, and the idea of, you know, there's not a teacher at the front with all this knowledge that's going to share that knowledge. It's how do we guide the learning in a classroom? How do we create the environment of safe student voice so that we can all actually learn together?
We get to share what we did on the weekend, how we're feeling. And I think it's a great idea because everybody gets to share their feelings and how feeling, and everybody gets closer to each other, so nobody feels left out. I'm Brianna, and I'm thankful for my I like to speak in the circles all the time.
It's about truly listening. It's not about just me. It's about me in relation to my community in the classroom.
It's good having a talking circle in the classroom because you can hear all these different things, and we don't talk about the same thing all the time.
You know, if there's something on your mind, then let's talk about it, and then we can get into the learning.
My name's Lucas, and I'm thankful for a roof over my head. I'm thankful for the opportunity that some kids don't have. And let her know my thought, and I can trust everyone.
We have a lot of curriculum that we have to cover. It's starting with the big ideas, you know, just getting the big idea out there and say, what do you wonder? And we can build from there. Inquiry in a topic will not be built truly until a student is feeling safe to wonder. Really setting the environment for how we're going to learn in that classroom.
So sometimes when we're done our community circle, we stand in the circle, and Miss like takes a piece of paper and brings it to the middle of the circle with some markers, and she writes down some like questions for math. I like the way we're learning math because we all get a turn to speak, and we all get the privileges to share our answers. And every time we do math, it's not some boring old way that other schools do. We get to find a creative way that we do it. I don't really like math that much, but the way the Sam teaches it, it's just like a pow, right at you.
Like how every time you do math, it's like different, it's not the same.
I like math because the way Miss M teaches it, it helps me. I don't get stressed out now by doing my math. So I feel like everybody feels safe when we do this stuff because nobody makes fun of you. Say somebody said the wrong answer, but the way they got there, we don't really care about the answer. The way we got there is what really matters. It's good when they share their thoughts, so I know what they're thinking. And when they share their ideas, you can add some more ideas, so you can build more.
There are times when a student doesn't want to come to the circle. So what we do is I like to acknowledge that and say, they're not ready right now, but we're going to have a space for them when they're ready to come. Generally, within 5 minutes, they're coming to the circle. They're still listening. They're still in the space. I have never had a situation where somebody has not joined, because I do believe that we all want to feel like we belong, and that's giving them the space and the respect to say, maybe you're not quite ready yet, but I know you will be.
Community means everybody gets together and we do good things for each other. We care for each other. We protect each other. There's no one getting left out.
In a talking circle, sometimes people want to pass. Sometimes we need time to think. And another thing that I talk about with the students is, if you don't have something to say right now, you need thinking time, because that is really important when it comes to in a classroom environment. So when the feather's going around, somebody else might say something that you're connecting with. Oh, it gives you an idea. So then we're actually having some patience, not contributing right now. I'll hold on to that. And when it comes around to me, I'll make a connection. So a lot of our learning is about building connections and building connections from each other and the conversation. So it's about the respecting each other's voice, and then building on the connections that we share in the circle. When a teacher conducts a circle, they can witness right away a shift in their students. I guess when they feel that they're heard, it's like, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. We do that, we start the day that way, and then we get to the learning.
And we started, I didn't talk in community circle a lot, so we started talking even more. When we first started doing community circle, I didn't talk at all, but now I talk a lot.
So you can really see a slow transformation of a feeling of safety and confidence as we build the circle.
Every student's voice matters. Even if it's just one student, it can still mean a lot.
Past that, or it's going to start playing again. So I think that, to me, that's a very powerful video. For me, I know that I was never that kid that was afraid to say anything in school, right? I was always the one putting up my hand and like, I know the answer, more the teacher being like, hey, put your hand up sometimes, right? But there were always those kids that were shy, and I was always very aware of them. And as a teacher, especially, I was always aware of those kids, because I think kids that were like myself, I don't think we have to worry about too much in terms of school, right? Like, we're going to do well because we're going to get in there and we want to research and we want to talk and we want to do all the things. But those kids that are really shy for whatever reason, personality or life experiences, etc., I think a sharing circle particularly is good for them. I mean, it teaches the kids that are loud like me that, you gotta wait your turn and you need to think and slow down, and that's very important as well, right? But for those kids, I think especially, that don't feel comfortable to share, and we're always, writing on their report cards, that we wish they would, join in more, that sort of thing, or try to get them to do that. I think it's a way to do that, because when your voice is allowed to be heard and your voice is respected and you feel safe, that's when you're going to open up, you're going to start talking, especially when the kids that are there know that in that circle that you have a safe space where nobody gets to repeat outside of that circle, especially if it's something personal shared, they can't repeat that back, right? So I think there's different times you can do this, like community building, problem solving, and applied learning circles. There's different ways to do this. There's the typical sharing circle, like in the video particularly, where you might start the day with your learning circle, and that's great if you've got elementary. It's great if you've got junior high classes where, I know when I taught junior high, we had like a humanities group and we had a science math group, right? And so we would switch off during the day and then they would go do their different whatever options they might have during the afternoon sometimes on certain days. So, that can work really well there too. High school, it does get a little more tricky, but if there's a homeroom, again, that could be a time to do that even once a week or something like that. It lends itself really well to particular subjects. I think it can work in any subject, but I also know there's time constraints in high school. So, there are different ways to go about it. As a school setting, that as a priority is probably the best idea. But with that said, obviously there are different ways to do that. And like I said, there's the morning to start the day, check in with the wellness. I've seen this, when I subbed years and years ago with CBE for a while, I had a teacher for the grade 1-2 class that did it, and it was amazing, how the kids behaved in it, and it was great. And then there's behavior management, right? Like if there's a conflict or there's something going on in the classroom, it's easy to just call a sharing circle or a talking circle. It's easy to just say, okay, everybody put everything down, like things are just not going really well right now. We're just going to put it aside. Let's go form a circle and let's talk about this, like what's going on, and be amazed at how it diffuses everything. Or if you're able to, depending on the weather, go outside, take all the kids, okay, we're going to go outside and we're going to go sit in a circle and we're going to go talk, because then you're grounded as well and you're sitting on the outside surfaces, and it's very calming for kids. I've done it before. Restorative justice and general conflict resolution. So kids themselves could call one if they're having a dispute with another student and have that solved. Or it could be an overall school idea about how they resolve conflicts with kids, and teaching everybody about this, so that things don't escalate to the point where they're out of control, or you're kicking kids out of school, or they're going on suspension, that sort of thing. With counseling or healing circle, and of course I'm not advocating that teachers do that. That would be like a resource teacher or psychologist coming in, but it's definitely an option once the kids already know how to do that, that they could participate that. Any lesson you're teaching that includes each student's opinion, you know, and that should be a lot of the time, right? So you could do that. Problem solving and brainstorming, democratic decisions, and then just anytime you want everybody to be represented equitably with respect and without judgment, right? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So general sharing circles, right? So anytime you just want to, oh, sorry, that row. I did check it before I left, but I'm going to go to this one anyways. There's a book available. I apologize about that. And they move, oh my gosh, here we go. They moved both of these, but I have them at the end in the resources, so it's okay. But I want to move to inquiry-based learning. And I do have actually in the resource section, I'm going to move those links then up to there, because I have a Raven Speak, which is a website that's from Alberta, and there's the protocols and things like that on it. And I'm going to show you guys that. But inquiry-based learning, I think, is really important. In Indigenous teachings, it doesn't matter if it's First Nations, Métis, or Inuit. We're taught with open-ended questions, taught to look for our own solutions or answers, and hands-on, right? So think of this as like the idea of Aesop's fables as opposed to an Indigenous story, say like the 7 grandfather teachings, if you know anything about those. The difference is that there is no conclusion drawn. In Aesop's fables, there's a definite answer. This is the answer I want you to come to, right? This is the moral of the story. With Indigenous teachings, there is really an underlying theme in a story, but you want the child or the adult, for that matter, to come to that conclusion themselves. And you don't want to give them that answer. You want them to be able to make that decision on their own, which is really important. And I think that this is, I know this one for sure, just was using it. So talking inquiry, so knowledge building circles. And this is just an example. I just thought that this teacher had set this up really well. Sorry, it's taking a bit, there you go. So the reason I like this as well, because it does use specifically into curriculum. So I can show you how you can use a sharing circle or talking circle without it necessarily being, you know, that wellness check, where there's nothing wrong with that, but this is using it for curriculum. And she does have a video in here, but I'm not going to go through that. But she's talking about, you know, with an inquiry-based learning. So collecting a bunch of artifacts for whatever it might be that you're doing. And in this case, she was looking at forces unit and explosion of Japan and Chernobyl. So she was talking about these things. And she did also one for smallpox. And anyway, so just talking about different things. And then so established a space. So what is the meeting area for that? Setting the conversation norms, right? So, and again, like I said, I'll show you those protocols on the Raven Speak site. I'm going to replace those links that were bad, because it's essentially what those were showing, right? And then so you can use a protocol you've already set, you taught the kids already, and then you can start looking at wonder and questions. So like, I wonder, what is, how does, why might, what does, how something relates and connects to. And then that's sharing, right? So they discuss their questions within the circle and then talk about what they think. So what do they think about all this? And then they come back and after they've grouped and organized all their thoughts, they come back and they wonder again about some of those things. Record and model, as you can see there, she's got a record and model, and you can do that in your circle. And then she's done a sort and classify, and then come to conclusions. And of course, you adapt this for the particular grade level that you're working at, right? And how the kids would respond to this, and then coming back. And then of course, for the older ones, particularly, you know, you can get into all kinds of research that they could branch off from in that area. I also wanted to show you some subject specific areas, right? So this is actually, hopefully this works. This was the link. This is the link that I had from the other page, but it didn't show up. It worked on this one, yay. All right, so this is a sharing circle lesson plan, and this is grades 1 to 3, but I just want to show it as an example. And the curriculum has changed somewhat since then, but not the social studies yet. But the LA and math has, so it's not a matter though, because I think it fits in still really well. So it talks about the big ideas, and this is directly teaching about sharing circles themselves, and so you can fit that into social studies really easily within our curriculums. And you know, really looking at perspectives, and then how everybody belongs in a sharing circle. I like this lesson plan just because I think you can adapt it for the older kids as well. And then just talking about, like, they've shown in the different areas, so social studies, how do people live together peacefully, and and that really, I think, is a great concept to bring into the classroom. So why are we doing this? Why would we want to get along peacefully in our classroom, in our school? um, Looking at the language arts portion of it, stories and aspects of things like that in a sharing circle. And I do another one on storytelling, and storytelling is done in a circle, right? Just about everything we do is in a circle. And so talking about the storytelling as well, and you can bring that in, the difference between Indigenous storytelling and Western storytelling per se, or any other culture that you happen to be teaching about at that point. And then looking at health, there's always a health component and character building component involved in Indigenous anything, because it's just a part of our lives. It's a part of spiritual practice, is always to be working on those things, right? For instance, that idea that if you say something out loud, like if you say something poorly about yourself or somebody else, that you put that out into the world, right? And that's going to come back at you. It's what you think of yourself. You're telling yourself that, or you're saying that about somebody else. You're putting that negative thing onto somebody else. And so it's really thinking about the consequences of your behavior. And always, it's not a thing that is punished. It's just, you need to think about it, right? And are you listening to others? Are you thinking about their feelings, that kind of thing? And then math, you could collect, display and analyze data. So they just here we go. So they've got just some ideas just for some different lessons. And so I thought there's that book, The Sharing Circle, and there is a link for it online. I do use it in a different lesson or presentation that I've done. And then she lays it out from beginning to end. So anyway, there's lots of stuff on there, and she's also got some links. And of course, the medicine wheel always fits into it. You can't separate all those things, right? That's the problem. I talk about it and I try to break it into those 5, but really everything overlaps all the time, right? So, and then there's the literature circles, which I think are another cool way to go about this. And again, it depends on the age group of the kids, but this can be done all the way up to high school. But literature circles, I think, are really cool. And again, I know a lot of these things are teacher pay teachers, that sort of idea, and I don't have any problem with anybody doing that, right? But I think on here, this is laid out well enough that you wouldn't have to purchase that per se. I would just modify it for yourself. But for the older kids, you're choosing a novel. For the younger ones, you could be using a lower level of reading, but getting them together. And then once they know the rules of the sharing circle, then they can break into smaller groups and use that same thing, right? You could have a group of 4 or 5 kids, or even up to 6, and they still follow the same rules of the circle, but in each of their own groups, right? So once they know those rules really well, then all you have to do really is go around and monitor and making sure that they're following that and how they're presenting to each other and looking after each other, right? And you group the students by choice cards and literature circle binders you could have. Like, she's got all kinds of really great ideas on here, and reading schedules. And I think it's just a great way to be able to get kids to work on their own together in groups, where we're always, I know for myself, kind of frustrated. You're going and monitoring circles, and how are they doing, and that sort of thing. But once they have these rules, it makes it, I think, a lot easier to make sure that you're monitoring that without having to, I would say, what's the word? You're not policing them anymore, right? You are just monitoring how they're doing, because they know how to do this. I want to include this lesson plan as well, because it's what is storytelling. And so it leads you really into, with that language arts piece, looking at storytelling and sharing circles. And it introduces the idea of Indigenous storytelling. So I think that that's really important. Again, here's some more, there's some procedure in here as well, protocols for doing it. But then, there's, KWL plus activity assessment and that sort of thing. And just gives you some ideas for storytelling. And the session I do on storytelling, I get into greater detail about that. But, like I got here, it's integral to Indigenous languages and culture. You can't separate storytelling, circles, land-based learning, any of those things from each other, because they're all interrelated, right? All stories, all the languages, Indigenous languages, relate to the land. As I learn Cree, I'm always blown away at how poetic the language actually is, and funny. It's hilarious. Some of the way that some of the words are put together. And the reason it is because they're all land-based words, because everybody was outside, everything relates to the land. And it's just a really cool way to learn when you're together. And I think you can also relate some of that as well. Bring in some of the languages of the people that are from the land that you are on, whether it's, Cree or Blackfoot or Dene or whomever it may be in your area, and just integrate some of that and show the kids that, right? And I always encourage people to apps online, like Masquatchees has, an app for Cree. I'm not sure what I haven't looked for Blackfoot one yet because I don't speak Blackfoot at all, but I'm sure that there's got to be. I know I've got a website with First Languages. It's actually, I think it's called firstlanguages.ca or .com, and they've got a whole list of different ones on there. I also wanted to include some stuff from music. I started off as a music teacher, and I just thought, I know for myself, I did everything in circles with the young ones, even into junior high. But there's some really cool ideas on here, and it's in elementary. A lot of times you may not even have a separate music teacher in a lot of schools. So it's a really great way to make sure that all kids are heard again, right? So, but I love those organized chaoses or title. Kind of describes how I'd always teach too. It looks like it could be chaotic, but there's some organization to it. But talking about drum circle logistics and community building, she's got a whole bunch of lists on here. Community building circles. Just learn. She talks about learning circles, behavior management, and elementary music, and that sort of thing too. So there's some really good tips on there for music if you're doing that. Again, I'm not going to get into great detail about this because not everybody's teaching music, but there's also a link here for music terminology and writing and composing for the older ones. And Greater Victoria School Division has some really cool ideas for drumming, music and art on here as well. So there's a video that's available. There's some traditional drumming songs, just some cool stuff that you can do. There's some art stuff that can be done as well. So I just included that. Yeah, so here's where this is some of the stuff, like I said, I've got on here that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. So would have been some of the links that are the one of the other ones that didn't work at the beginning. So again, I don't know why it didn't. But no matter, I've got it on here. It's when people move stuff on their websites and then they change the, the ending of the link. So Pass the Feather. I actually know the lady that runs this one. She's in Calgary. So it's taking a little bit of time. But she does have some protocols on here as well as some information about the restorative justice circles, which I think are really cool. That's why it didn't work earlier. Maybe their website is just really slow right now. So this one's Talking Feathers for sharing and restorative justice circles. And she gets into so at least I know it's on their end this time. Sorry. See if it stays this time. If not, I'm just gonna have to leave. Going again back to the value of circles, and so this has a generic modified medicine wheel on here. So when we meet in circles, like I know even when I go to my drum group on Thursday nights, we drummed at Shaw Millennium Park, and I drummed in the march on Saturday from City Hall down to Shaw Millennium Park with some friends, and at the front of the march. But when we're together and we do anything, whether it's in ceremony and drumming together is a ceremony too, and we open it up, right? So you open it up to the east, and then you close it at the end at the west. And in the sweat lodge as well, use the directions and things like that. So if you really wanted to get into that with the kids, you could talk about that, right? And you could talk about everything's in cycles and circles. You can really bring in some science there too, right? Talking about the sun and the moon, the seasons, the journey of life from birth to death, and just talking about, the seasons of our life, as well, talking about, starting in the east as a baby and going to the south as a teen, going to the west as an adult, and then north as, getting into that, you know, the older years, and you know, just where we are in our place and everybody's place, and what role we play. And you know, often we look at young ones as not having, you know, enough knowledge or understanding, but it's not true, right? We are all in our own place, but we can all teach each other something. So I think there's also that level of respect in saying that, that a child can teach somebody who's in the north of their life, right? A baby in the east can teach somebody who's a grandparent something. You know, we all have something to learn from each other. It's not just one directional in that sense either. Right, and we pass that knowledge on to each other, and we're dependent upon one another, and that's the important thing, right? The baby's dependent on the grandchild, and or the grandparent, and the parents are dependent on the grandparents, right? You know, all those things if we go on. And it's really important too, I think. If you go on to on Empowering the Spirit that I showed you, they also have a link on there on the Orange Shirt Day section on there, for protocols that you can actually print off a poster, and you can put that on your wall as well, and it's for each grade division level too, so it goes up to high school. Really important too, as I said, we're all equal, so no one in front of you, no one behind you, no one is above you, and no one is below you. Really important. I'm just promoting all those areas of respect. And like I said, there are some sharing circle protocols on here as well, so you can go through those. Just pretty much the same across the board for most circles. And then if you wanted to, you know, facilitate a circle for restorative justice in this case, you know, if somebody's wrong someone else, they feel that way, you know, there's some ideas on here as well. And just talking about, you know, they refer to the Seven Grandfathers Education Institute, restorative justice for classrooms, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I just thought it's a good site for information. And then I like this one too, because it is for middle schools. So I didn't want to just, I know it's mostly for elementary, you find a lot of this stuff, but I think it's really important to look at, you know, those middle schools and talk about restorative circle, because there's so many ways to have conflicts at that age, right? And we can really, you know, be proactive and get around them by looking at some of this stuff first, and starting it with the kids. You know, there's different questions here too. There's questions for community building, which is really important, right? Like, where do you live? What are things about your classroom? Like, just your favorite place before or after school? What neighborhood do you live in? All those things really to connect everybody, because we're so disconnected within our cities and within our culture, living in this context. You know, there's questions I know that sometimes people think are, I know we all find different things rude. Like, I know in Indigenous culture, there's, you know, people are very direct about certain things, just like in other cultures. But I mean, the first question we always ask, I know as a Métis person, is, oh, who's your family? Like, what's your family name? Because but other people might find that rude. I know I've even seen comments online, because they're, you know, somebody will immediately say when they say they're Métis, oh, who's your family? Like you want proof. It's not about proof. It's like, I want to connect to you. Like, who are you? Where are you from? Just like, what community are you in? So, you know, if you're First Nations, like, be what reserve are you related to? If you're Métis, what settlement? Or, you know, in Saskatchewan, where are you from? Where are you from in Manitoba? You know, we have these connections, right? I have friends that are from the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, and they're Inuit, and you know, they'll talk about, oh yeah, no, like, you know, so and so's family. You may not know those people directly, but you know them by their families. So I think it's really important to get kids to start connecting more to each other. They've got questions for checking in, right? Like, what was going on? How are you feeling? You know, just talking about a little bit about that. Often kids are never actually asked how they felt about something directly. Like a question, you know, like, what are you most excited to learn about right now? Or what are you least excited about? Or those sorts of things, getting them to check in with themselves. 5 questions for sharing our stories, right? You want to talk about things like, for instance, when have you felt sad, angry, disappointed, frustrated, embarrassed, or all those things, right? And these are things you're not going to do until you've established the circle and the kids feel comfortable doing this and they understand it. Learning about relationships, learning about values, encouraging dreams, taking responsibility. I just thought these are some really great questions. And I don't think it's just middle school. You could take those and turn them into ones for the younger ones. Goodreads has, that'll pop up, hopefully it will. And if you go to any of the Indigenous books sites too, they will have, but this is one that I actually have and I've used it. for the younger ones, but again, like I said, you can modify it. This is supposed to be grades 1 to 3, but I think for me it was just really important. Well, they say K to 12, but I mean I used it for the younger ones particularly, and just setting it up. But they do have ideas on there, and just I thought it was better than 3.5. That's just me. There are other books on it, but that's kind of the definitive one. And then there's an online pedagogy project, just to make you aware of it. So this is a First Nations Pedagogy Online. If you don't know about this website as well, it's got some really great resources too. Some information about talking circles, the object of power. I am going to say one thing about the talking or sharing stick, because I've done a little bit more research on this. And to avoid appropriation, really important. Either get someone who has the teachings to make one to show you, and then you're okay to do that. So somebody who's Indigenous who's done it before, or purchase one from somebody who is Indigenous. There is kind of that appropriation thing where if you just make one and pass it around kind of thing, it's not really, there's protocols for everything we make. For instance, I have a friend who's a maker, an artist, and she's a knowledge keeper, and she taught me, I got the materials for my rattle and I got my materials for my drum, but she showed me how to do these things, and she gave me the teachings for the rattle. And same with moccasins, anything like that. Like I go to her and I'll offer her tobacco, you know, when or I'll pay for materials too, but I'll offer her things to teach me, so that I get the proper teachings to do these things. So that's really important. It doesn't have to be a talking stick though. Like I've used I went to the dollar store and got those rocks that have the writing on them, like hope or patience or whatever it might be. And I think I used the one that said truth or hope, and I passed that around as well. So it doesn't have to be a talking stick, so don't get stuck on that. But if you're going to, it's a good idea to get those teachings to make one. Yeah, and then they do talk about online talking circles or sharing circles, and I know that I've done that as well. You know, in the advent of we don't have enough people around. You know, circles are unique, and then there's a idea of preparation, and there's a process on here as well for you, and there's some recommended links. And then this one, Teachers on Fire. And I want to include this because it really was about the teachers themselves who were doing a master's degree, and there was a class that they did and talking about the power of sharing circles. And as you can see, this is a very large sharing circle because it's a lot of adults came together. But just if you read through this article, it's the power of how that affected them, and especially in their personal life too. Hi. So it gets me in the chat. In about 3 minutes, I should be done, and then I'm going to open it up to chat, and I'll take it off the recording as well for you. But just using it for personal, for professional development too, right? And bringing it into the school. I think a lot of, I want to say, underlying struggles that teachers have in their schools could be solved a lot by doing this. I think as a staff, people would come together and feel more secure and safe and be able to get out some of the issues that are bothering them. You know, we live in schools that are, some days, you know, are tough, and depending on the school you're working, it can be really tough. And if people aren't talking and they hold things in, it's really detrimental to your health. It's detrimental to all the people you're working with and yourself, and you become sick and angry and tired and all those things, right? But if we can feel like we can actually get some of those things out in a safe way, like if we do this for the kids, why wouldn't we do this for ourselves, right? And then they've got, you know, some ideas too for the teachers if you're doing PD, and some ideas about what questions you might want to ask, and talking about with your kids, right? Like you've got a disruptive class. I think this is great. Like I work to spec ed a lot of the time, and I think this would be a really good thing for those kids as well, and just for empowering them. And then staff activities. So there's some of those. And there's a video there as well that they did about the entire thing. And this is actually from inmates. So I encourage everybody to watch this one because it really talks about in the US using it for restorative justice. Okay, question is if you okay, well, you don't have to go to an elder or knowledge keeper. You can find other people for a talking stick. Yeah, so honestly, I would suggest like a feather, pass around a feather, or pass around, like I said, an object that you find important, because it doesn't have to be a talking stick. It's just a talking stick itself is really more of a cultural thing that you're borrowing from, that can border on appropriation. So if you don't have the ability to do that, I would just use a different object. And it could just be like you can go to the store, there's like turkey feathers. Like I have a couple of those that are, and I have one that somebody had abandoned somewhere, and I brought it home and smudged it, and I'm using it as well. It's got some beading on it and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It doesn't even have to be that. It can just be a larger feather or something like that that you can decorate. That's not something you're appropriating then. I just wanted to point out that the talking stick or the sharing stick is something that could border on that. Oh yeah, so yeah, if you got one from a Blackfoot Crossing and they said that was okay, then that's fine. Yeah, as long as they're saying that's okay. Like I would definitely make sure that the people you're getting it from say it's okay. That's the only thing I'm saying. Yeah, perfect. I did want to include this. This is more of a pedagogical thing, but this is for a women's shelter that they had done some stuff with healing circles, but I just thought I'd include it for you guys to read, just as teachers you may be interested in it. It's from the Native Social Work Journal. But just giving you a little bit more idea on the background of sharing circles and how it's been used in different ways. And obviously you guys can read that, so I'm not going to read it for you, but it is in the resource section here for you guys. And with that said, I did it. Oh shoot, I'm just 1 minute over, but I'm going to stop recording. But that's